please don't hesitate. Well, I would like to say I am encouraged. I welcome you to this presentation that I've created. My name is Vicki Hinesley. I have been teaching here at the Rec Center for about 4 years. Now, COVID did have a big interruption, and I was unable to do it continuously, but this is my 20th presentation. So it's been a wonderful thing to have, and I enjoy doing it. My topic today is a topic that's different from most of mine. Most of my topics revolve around mind, brain, and body. How does the brain and the body, how do they work together to direct the mind is usually where I'm at. But this topic today is very practical. It was important to me a few months ago as my husband and I realized we had not done anything to a will we created about 25 years ago. And it specifically dealt with the guardianship of our very young children. Well, those children are now 30s, in their mid-30s. And so we realized that will had served a purpose, but we needed something a bit different now. And so that's where we went with it. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is things I picked up as a result of needing to go through that process and what I've learned and how much I realize now that I really did not know. I thought I did, but I did not know. So I want to make it very, very plain that my class today is basically an opportunity to give you broad information. And hopefully that information will help you make good decisions for your family. It is not in any way a legal advice to anyone specifically. And I would highly recommend that if you are involved in creating or administering any kind of estate, that you seek the advice of an attorney. Because now that I've looked at this in depth, oh my goodness, there are a lot of things to know. So we will proceed with what I've learned. Oh, wrong button. I'm sorry, that was not the button. Okay. It's the off and on button. Okay, so I will be real honest with you about me. When I started thinking about an estate or a will or an update to the one we had, I really had sort of 3 questions, but really 2. My first one was, do I really need a will? What would happen if I didn't have one? Would it be a problem? And really, I will skip down to the 3rd one because the other one was, do I have to hire an attorney? Because I realized that they cost money. And I was hoping that this would be a simple procedure that I could deal with just individually. And then to not hire an attorney, I wondered, can I avoid probate? Well, honestly, I didn't even know what probate was. I'd heard the term, but I wasn't able to define it for myself or anyone else. So those were the 3 things that I wanted to know. And it may be that you too would like to know that. And I hope we'll answer those questions today. I have goals for the class. I have learned that in my life, if I can establish goals, I can feel good when I see that I've accomplished something. So my goals for us today are, number 1, what discussions could be held before someone passes away? And I'm going to say, now that I've thought more about it, it needs to be before they pass, way before they pass away. It needs to be before incapacitation. Incapacitation, of course, is being incapable of controlling or handling your affairs, and it's in your glossary. So if you find that you want to have a specific definition for what incapacitation means, which, by the way, I didn't say this, but on the first screen, it said these ideas or suggestions are pertinent to Texas. Every state has different laws that govern how they do probate and how wills are done in that state. So what I say today goes for Texas. If you need a different state, you need to be aware that it could be different. Also, I would like to explain what are the actions necessary and who's responsible in the first day, first 2 days, 3 days, month after a death. If you had asked me this 2 months ago, I would say, I'm really not sure what to do. And I think we all agree that this topic is not one that most families want and enjoy having. Matter of fact, if I think about my own family, my parents or my in-laws who are all deceased, I don't remember ever having a conversation about anything that I'm going to talk about today. So even before anyone passes, have a conversation, and we'll talk about what those conversations could be about. And then you will know what to do in that first day, in that second day, and who's responsible for all those decisions. And the third goal is having a will. What happens if you have one compared to what you would go through if you do not? And when I say a will, I'm very aware that there's another way to go, and that's called a trust. And so I don't go too much in depth about a trust because you definitely need the help of an estate attorney to create that. But I am aware that they exist. Actually, that's the direction I went with my husband and I went, and come to find out there was a good reason we had to do it that way, which I'll share with you later. So the fourth one is who represents the heirs. The heirs is another glossary term of people who are who will inherit your assets. Who represents them and what is their responsibility in probate? What goes through probate is my fifth goal. There are different kinds of assets. Assets are anything of value. And we'll find out that there are some that are we call personal property versus real property. And real property is like real estate. That's the way I remember it. It is your land and your mineral rights if you have that. And whatever is attached to the land is the real property. Your personal property are the things that are not attached to any of the land. And so obviously it's your car, your boat, your jewelry, your collections. Those are personal to you. So it depends on what kind of property we're talking about. And it's also going to depend on what kind of assets they are, which we'll go through. And then finally, what can we do to make probate easier for our loved ones? There are several steps that make this process more easier to handle, less costly, and with less angst for the family. So we'll talk all about that. What I'd like for you to do for just a second is to look at the list. What is your goal? Is it stated up here? Because I suspect that when you signed up for the class, whether you realized it or not, you had a goal in mind. And if it is, put a little check mark by it just to see if my goals in the class will match yours. So take just 10 seconds and look at that and look at your list and see what you think. And I will give you that. Just brief minute, or not even a minute, but a few seconds. Now, if I had all the time in the world and we weren't filming this, I would say, turn to your neighbor and share your goal with each other. But this is not perhaps the right context for doing that. So the teacher piece, which I am a retired teacher, says interaction is important, and I understand that, but I hesitate to try and do that in this circumstance. So let's move forward and let's talk about the discussion and conversation. First conversation. Where are your documents? And I'm pretending here that I'm talking to my mother and father. If I had have known this, I would have said, Mom and Dad, I love you very, very much, but I also need to be a good person to help take care of all of the things that could possibly happen. So where do you keep your documents? Now, in the last 10 years, we have this whole new arena of documents, and they're called digital documents, and they exist on your computer or in the cloud or wherever you keep that kind of information, or on websites. And so next time, let's talk about that part of the document that you would need. The second one is called the disposition of remains. That is an actual document. Now, if a lot of people say, do I have to fill out a document about where you want my body taken? Well, you don't if you have an executor or someone in your family that can take that responsibility. If that's not easily taken care of in a conversation, then yes, you can get an affidavit and you can fill it out and you can give it to an agent, whomever you wish to trust is an agent. Or it can be hopefully a family member, a trusted family member. The third one is, do you want a memorial? Do you want a funeral? Or is it something different that you want? I think my generation assumed we all had a funeral. And I think that's changed a bit. So it may not be what everyone wants. Also, the conversation of, Mom, Dad, do you have assets, and where are the assets? Do you have beneficiaries for these assets? If so, where will I find that information? It might not be a document. It might lie with a financial advisor. So where are your assets kept? And the fifth one is personal property. Mom, Dad, did you intend for any specific person to get this item? My husband, for example, is restoring an old 65 now, 65 truck, Chevrolet pickup truck. And I happen to know he wants to give it to our older daughter. And I want my younger daughter to know that he I don't think he's written it down anywhere, but in his mind and heart, he'd like to give it to my older daughter. So anyway, if there's some personal property, it needs to be written down specifically, ideally, or it certainly needs to be shared with the family. Because as you probably would agree, you see a different side of some family members when it comes to sharing the assets of an estate. So you want to make that very, very clear. So I want to reemphasize, ask ahead of time, where are the documents? You cannot imagine the angst it causes when you must look in every nook and cranny of your house or your farm to find anything that resembles a will or intent for that person who has passed. Now, I told you in the little blurb that I would give you an idea of what happens for the progression of when someone passes away. I have no clue if you've gone through this, but it is a comfort to many to know the process ahead of time, because you're already in an emotional state where you're thinking a lot of different things, and they're not always organized sequentially. So here we go. So it depends on where the death occurs. If it occurs in your home and this person has been ill and has been under hospice care, then you call the hospice people. They will direct you to do what they prefer. If you've not had hospice care for this individual, it says call the doctors. Now, I know when I call a doctor, do I get the doctor? No. What is it I hear first thing? Call 911 if this is emergency, because the doctor might not get back to you for 24 hours or so. So actually, I would circle call the paramedics. And the paramedics, of course, are going to come out to your home. And what they will do is one of two things. They're going to try and revive the person. They'll give life-saving service to this individual to try to get them breathing or whatever, unless it's very, very obvious that they've passed. But what the paramedics cannot do is they cannot certify death. They need a medical doctor or physician assistant, that type of medically trained person to actually certify death. So they probably will take them to the ER, okay? However, if you have a DNR, which is a do not resuscitate document, they will not try to revive you. Now, here's an interesting tidbit about a DNR. I've never filled one out, and I thought, well, maybe I should have. Actually, if you look in your glossary about DNRs, you will see that they are for the terminally ill. And a perfectly healthy person would not want to sign a DNR, because if somehow you got in an accident and someone produced the DNR, they would not be able to work on you to help you. They would not be able to give you medical attention that you would want. So a DNR does not apply to anyone who's still perfectly healthy and, well, I would say not needing to make that decision for them at that time. So DNRs are very specific. No, but if there is one, then you would say to the paramedic, here's our DNR. You can call a funeral home, although I am still a bit concerned that I don't know that a funeral director can actually pronounce death. Once again, that's a very medical diagnosis, and it needs to be made by a professional in that field. So you get a doctor or a physician's assistant or nurse's assistant, one of those who have that capability of doing that. If the death occurs in a hospital, all right, let's say your loved one has said, oh, I'd like to donate my organs. That's a very specific situation. You have to die in the hospital for that to occur, because your organs have to be kept viable. So you're not going to be able to die at home and say, oh, but have said, I'd like to donate my eyes or whatever. It's something that has to happen in the hospital and keep that organ oxygenated and all that. However, there is another option, and it's called the Will Body Program. And UT Southwestern is a facility that does accept willed bodies. I think that they don't want you to wait several days before calling them. But if you know that your loved one said, I'd like to will my body to science, then once they have passed and you've gotten that death certification, then you can call. Now, if you know that someone does not want to have the expense of having a funeral or having any kind of service or even a cremation, the Willed Body Program has no charge at all. They will come pick the body up. They will, and there are some times that they cannot use the body, and not many. In some cases, they can't use it, and they'll tell you. But if they use it, they will return the ashes to you if you wish. You just have to tell them that. This is all free. So if someone says there's no money in our family to do any of the normal disposition of body after death, that is an option. Now, I will just mention the differences in the disposition of the body. The burial, I will say a few years ago, there was a law that was passed that funeral homes have to be willing to share their charges with people ahead of time, because I guess what was happening is a lot of things got put in and the family went, well, that's a lot of money, but they said, well, that's just the way we do it. And so there was a bit of upheaval about that. And so the law now says that if you are a funeral home, you must disaggregate the charges and make everyone aware that they can choose what they want. So there is no law that requires a casket. You can use a difference in a coffin and a casket. The coffin is six-sided, it looks like this, looks like the body shape more. And the casket, casket is usually a little more elaborate. So the caskets can cost anywhere, I guess, from $500 to $2,000, which seems a bit low to me. I'm thinking that inflation may have made that more expensive. Then, if you are going to, well, you would bury a casket. You will have to understand what the cemetery requires, which is a container, because the casket can deteriorate. Most of them do. And so a cemetery will ask or require you to have some kind of a bigger container that the casket goes in. And sometimes these are concrete or steel. So there's an expense for that. If you go with the full funeral can cost $5,000 to $10,000 or up, depending on how many of the services you use. And then, of course, if you bury it in a cemetery, you have to pay for a burial plot. So traditional funerals today can cost up to $20,000. And that can be a very onerous responsibility for especially someone who's trying to administer the estate and realizing their estate's small. So that's one thing that you have to think about. The cremation avenue is a bit cheaper. They vary from $750 to $4,000, depending on how much of a service you want, like a funeral. You can have a funeral with a cremation with an urn. Urns, you can buy them online, and you can be very elaborate or very basic. Where can bodies be buried in Texas? Well, obviously cemeteries and some private properties. Okay, what private properties are we talking about? Well, there are gardens. Sometimes the cemeteries have a garden that you can disperse the ashes. You can do that on private land with the permission from the landowner. You can do it on public land with permission from that public entity. You can do it on federal land if you request permission. You can have the ashes dispersed in the ocean. does need to be 3 miles out from the land, not the beach. And you may need a state permit. I will say that a lot of the websites will say to you, most people do not go and get these permits, they just go and do it, but you're supposed to have that. And this one, of course, just cracks me up about from an airplane. It says that the law does prohibit dropping objects that might cause harm. Now, who would have thought that? And that cremains are not considered hazardous as long as they're removed from the container first. So evidently they felt like, you needed to be very specific about, you have to dump them out. But so there are ways that you can take care of a cremation. Cremations by definition are usually a bit cheaper, actually about half. And I even saw a couple of ads online that said cremation for $650. Now, that just means that they will cremate the body and hand you the ashes in a cardboard box. But if that's what you want, then that's available. So those are your options, as I know them, to dispose of the body. I mentioned to you that you need to have a medical professional certify the death, because you will need something called a death certificate, actually a certified death certificate, not a copy. And there are two parts to a death certificate. One is called the medical certification. And that's the medical people that treated the body or treated the person or pronounced the death originally. If this death is not due to natural causes, then they're going to require a coroner or a medical examiner to get involved in that situation. And you can't release the body, you can't dispose of the body until that medical certification has been completed. They do have, I think, 5 days. Okay, they do have 5 days to get that medical piece completed. And then they give it to the funeral director or the crematorium director. Now, I wasn't able to determine, if you will, the body, how that process really looked. It wasn't available on UT Southwestern's website. So I am not really sure how getting that death certificate goes to that last criteria in that situation, but you have a phone number, you call them and you could ask that. The funeral director, the crematorium director, and I will tell you, a lot of times I've seen now that the funeral homes include crematorium service as well. They probably recognized they were leaving out a possible revenue stream if they didn't offer that. So it can be done with that same location, that same facility. So the funeral director completes this death certificate information with input, personal information from the family. And the executor, whom we'll talk about, what is an executor here in a minute, will actually need 10 to 12 certified death certificates, because that is what will be part of what's needed to get access to the assets that we'll talk about that people usually leave, such as life insurance, such as annuities, such as IRAs and other documents that type of with your financial, if you have a financial advisor. I will tell you that the first certified copy is $21. And any document and additional certified copies you wish to order will be only $4 each if it goes with the original first copy order. So you have to order several at once to take advantage of the discount. So keep that in mind. Now, whether you can get this quickly or not, I have read different things. If you walk in to the courthouse and you request a death certificate, I think it can happen pretty fast. I don't know that you walk out with it, but within a few days. But if you do it through the mail, it can take several weeks. And that may have been during the pandemic, I can't guarantee. But just to be sure, if you need a death certificate, you know that you can order them. You can order them through the mail, you can order them online, you can order them by walking in. So it depends on how quickly you need it, which avenue you want to go through there. Okay. So you need the death certificate. Okay, so here is the little checklist that I think. First of all, immediately after death, call 911 or hospice if they're in hospice care. After you call 911, you get the paramedics to come out and revive, or DNR says don't. They transport the body to the ER. The doctors there will certify that it's the death. There is a death. Okay, so next, probably you're going to want to inform your family and close friends. So that can involve, of course, phone calls, text messages, and emails. So I would just say, if you have a couple of close relatives that would be the disperser of the information, that would be helpful. If you're the one who's mainly in charge of handling all these arrangements, get some extra people who can help you share that information. Then you're going to need to start your little search for these documents that I said earlier. Please have a conversation about where they're kept. And the reason being that once you find any document that mentions the wishes for burial or for the remains of the body, you know exactly what to do next. That body is being held in the ER, and they're going to want to know where are you going to go with it? What's next? That document will help you know, am I headed to the funeral home or the crematorium, or am I calling UT Southwestern to come pick the body up? That's why you need that. You need to know what to do. Now, I recognize that not all families have these conversations. So if necessary, call a meeting of the immediate family for a decision. Now, I even have in your glossary, who is the immediate family? Is there definition differs in Texas versus federal? I would just say in Texas, it's going to be the spouse, the children, mother and father, siblings. So that could be a lot of people, and they're not all going to be local, I'm sure. So whomever is kind of heading this up, or if they already know they're going to be the executor, hopefully that person had that conversation with the mom and dad or grandma and grandpa. Do you have a will, and did you name the executor? That is very important, not to say my heirs or my descendants. They need a name of a person or two if it's likely this executor could pass before them. So once you've found this document or you've had this conversation with the immediate family, and in parentheses, considering available financial resources. If one sister said, I want a full-blown funeral with a hearse and a whole, procession. I want viewing ahead of time. And you, as the executor or the person in charge, goes, we only have a minimal amount of money for this. Then there you go. Here comes the family getting involved and making this much more emotional. So that's why you hopefully had this conversation. Okay, then the body gets transported to the funeral home or the crematorium or the institution like UT Southwestern. The next thing is if that deceased person has dependents. It's unlikely, I mean, if they're older, it's unlikely they do, but you may have a grandchild or a child that's incapacitated and has been all their life. You may have a dependent. And you may have pets, and you will need to find people who can help you take care of them until final arrangements are made. But if you are taking care of business and you need to leave, you might have a problem with what needs to be made in arrangements in the interim. The next one is if you leave grandma and grandpa's home, secure it, lock it up, not just the home, but the vehicles and especially the valuables, because it is not uncommon for people who know about this event to come in and take things that maybe they think are theirs. Maybe they are not, but secure the property and everything else around it. If this person had been employed, is employed, you would want to notify that employer, obviously, and you might ask about any paychecks that come, in arrear. And if there's any office company offered life insurance that maybe they have. Because if you have an opportunity to take advantage of it, why not? It'll save you in the long run. After a few days, you're going to need to locate that will or that trust, hopefully. It's not stuck under some mattress. And the birth certificate, possibly, and the social security number, and other documents. And I put this in yellow because I was looking at it last night and I said, what was I thinking about beneficiary? I want you to put a strike out through that, what's in yellow, and instead, I should have written after where the word with is, I would say the words regarding, assets, and debts. Debts, D-E-B-T-S, debts. I know. We go, where's the B sound? As I said, if you have a will, you know exactly who's going to be taking care of all the millions, not millions, but multitude of processes that need to be taken care of, and that's the executor. And hopefully that person is named. And in your glossary, you're going to see that that executor needs to be, hopefully, a member of the family or a trusted friend who will be trusted and respected by the family. Because sometimes what this executor has to do is not popular with all the family members. And it needs to be someone who is calm and who can speak carefully to other members of the family, yet have a sense of, I know what I'm doing and I need to do this correctly, so that they become less agitated or less concerned about it. Then we need for the will, if there's anything in the will or any other document that says that this deceased was a member of a fraternal or religious group or perhaps the military, because there may be options for the burial if that is a situation that pertains to your loved one. And then you would begin going through the process of a funeral, if that's what you want, or memorial service. Whatever that might look like, you would begin that. You could write and submit an obituary. I know funeral homes often let you do that online, and people can go in and read. You can ask the funeral home or crematorium to order the death certificates for you. However, I am quite sure they're not going to do it free. They will charge you for it. And so I don't know if they have not had to deal with that, but a special, upcharge for ordering it for you, or just ordering it yourself would have been cheaper. I'm not sure, but you can ask them. But I can guarantee you they're not going to order 10 or 12 of them for no charge. Okay. So we've located a will or trust, hopefully. We know whether there's special situations with burial. We've submitted obituary, and we are aware of the death certificates needing to be requested. And number 7, we locate assets. And when I mentioned earlier that some people have they have financial institutions that hold their financial assets. And it is so very helpful if you know that. There may be some assets like stocks and bonds that the individual holds separate and apart from the financial institution that just has their name on it. I'm thinking of, like, when companies, you buy a stock or a bond individually. So where is all of that? You'll need a lot of digging in some situations, unless you've had the conversation and you know where it all resides. And then finally, you're going to want to hold or forward the mail service. And you can do that online. So you want the mail sent to probably the executor first, where I would say. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 minutes, or 10 maybe if you need it, to go to the bathroom and get a drink, because I recognize that's respectful. So please take that time, and we'll pause for a moment. And now that you're back, I will just take this moment to say, what I hope with all my classes is that if you get information here that's important for you to share with another person, please feel free to do that. Because I recognize that really the power of learning is the dissemination from the one person in the family. And if you hear something I've said and you go, oh, my sister or my daughter needs to hear this, then you tell them, or you share the handout with or the link to the video. So we now are going to move to the do not do list. And there are some very important do not do's here. Obviously, you do not want to cancel the water, electricity, gas, and cellular providers. There may be others, but these were the ones that came off the top of my head, because you still need to take care of the home and all of the things that will go with getting rid of the stuff if there's no survivor in the home. You do not want to turn off that cell phone, because with me, not always a lot, but some of my bills come to me through my email. The days of people sending out paper bills is quickly ending, and they don't want to do it anymore. And honestly, who wants all that paper either? So don't turn that off immediately. Do not close the bank accounts. These accounts usually have joint tenancy with rights of survivorship to them. So you don't want to have a whole mess created because you went in and said, oh, I need to close those accounts so there won't be any fraud. Well, let the bank, the people that need to know, the executor needs to handle that. The third one, do not promise or sell or by any means give away any items to loved ones. Part of the huge responsibility of being an executor is to accumulate or aggregate all of the assets of the deceased. And these assets, as we've talked about, can be financial, they can be whatever, real estate, they can be personal property, but as an executor, that executor can say this. Say Cousin Sue comes and says, Grandma has promised to give me her wedding ring. You say, Sue, I'm so glad that you brought that to my attention. But right now, I have to gather all the assets together in one place. I have to look at the will and make sure that I follow the wishes of, Grandpa or Grandma. And I will have to get back with you. And I think that's about as clear and respectful as you can be, is that you cannot say, oh, absolutely, take the ring. The ring may be valuable and it may not be. You don't know that. But your job, if you're the executor, is to accumulate all that and then accumulate notices of all of the creditors and the debt that Grandpa or Grandma may have left, because you have to pay the debts from the estate's assets, which may be challenging. You may have a lot of assets to pull from, or you may not. Okay, you may not drive their vehicles. And I recognize that, well, why not? I mean, we're just going to sit there. If there's an accident and by chance you caused it in this vehicle, now the individual who got hurt can sue the estate. So don't drive them and don't let anyone else drive them. But what you will do is to call Social Security and the pension providers if there are any. We all know that once you pass, that Social Security stops. And if you allow them to keep on paying because they haven't heard about the death and they hear about it, you will pay them back. And that could be quite a bit of money. Or the pension. I know that my pension will end when I pass away. And I don't want them to continue to pay, my survivors and then find out, oh my gosh, we owe them, $50,000 and didn't know. So you do have to let them know because they're notorious for getting their money back. They will. Now, we talked about assets, and this is in your glossary too. There are assets that must be probated, and there are assets that avoid probate. So the assets that avoid it are called non-probate assets, and they are very easy to identify. The non-probate assets have beneficiary designations that are signed. that name the beneficiary. And when that happens, you do not go to probate, the probate court, going, what do I do with these 401k? You will not need to do that, because that is non-probate. Now, the probate assets. Remember I said that the executor has to pay the debts out of the estate to, for example, medical care, taxes. We all know that, by the way, in Texas, we pay federal income tax. We do not pay state income tax. Everybody knows that, I think. In Texas, we do not have inheritance tax. We don't. We have federal inheritance taxes, but for most of us, it doesn't matter because it has to be over, at this point, $12 million. $12 million. So my family doesn't have to worry about any federal inheritance tax, to be honest. Okay, so what are the probate assets? They are the assets that are subject to creditor claims and expenses of administration. That means the executor uses those assets to pay back creditors. By the time it's our age, it's usually medical bills and things like that. And that could be a mortgage if you haven't paid your property off. It's a mortgage. Anything that assets that are titled in the decedent, which is the deceased person, they call it legally a decedent, in their name only. Now you may say to me, well, I think our property is titled in both my husband and my name. And that may be a situation that is true for you, and that may be fine. But if it's only in the decedent's name, the property is owned by only one person, it needs to be probated. Other things that go through probate are vehicles usually, unless you may say, I think we have an affidavit that says my car will go to, my son. And you may. That's one of the what ifs. But if it's not, then it goes through probate. Boats, collectibles, antiques, books, jewelry, furniture, and firearms. So those are probate items that, like I said, the executor, they have to aggregate all that and figure out how much money they have in those items. And as I mentioned, sometimes the executor has to sell things in order to pay the debts. And that's a very contentious issue for some family members. In some situations, the executor may have to sell the house because it has a mortgage on it. And if that's the situation, maybe someone in the family will say, I'll pay the mortgage and take over. Okay, that's just what if. But if that's not what you have, then you're going to be the executor who has to sell the house to pay the mortgage and the federal taxes. You're going to have, family members who are unhappy. And so once again, if mom and dad and the family had some conversations ahead of time, you could probably alleviate some of that. I don't know that it would all be alleviated, but some of it. So we have non-probate that go to beneficiaries. We have probate that is not assigned a beneficiary. That has to be gone through probate. Okay, and there's some what ifs in there, I understand. Now, I'm going to talk to you specifically about what is it a will does and what happens if you do not have one. I mentioned to you that, well, I don't know that I did. A will describes how to distribute the assets of an estate of the decedent to the names that are provided maybe in a piece of paper that identify exactly who gets the truck. Okay. And the will is especially advantageous for naming guardians for your children. Okay. Also, the will hopefully names the executor. And behind the name says, as an independent administrator. Those two words, or three, are written in the will, and that's important. An independent administrator is going to be able to execute the will without getting permission from the probate court for every step that needs to be taken. So, wow, what a gift to the executor to know that they have the will and it directs them in what to do. Okay? This executor becomes a fiduciary. A fiduciary is a person who is conducting business for others, and their benefit is a primary, only their benefit, for only their benefit. And you as the executor are not concerned about how you can enter into that. So the executor must, as I mentioned, be a person you trust, that who is of highest integrity and who can handle the various family situations that can arise in a diplomatic way. Because there is a process, and I'll show it to you in a minute, of what this executor must follow. And depending on how well the will is written, it can be very streamlined, it can be very quick, as in 6 months, and this is done, or if it's not, it can take years. And I would suggest that anyone who's making a will, who has an executor in mind, ask them if that is a job they are willing to take on. Because I'm telling you this, it can be something else. Okay? So the will is your roadmap to how to take care of everything. If you did not have a will, and this is, of course, in Texas, I'm going to say all of what I've said is applicable to Texas and maybe not other states. So grandpa died and you don't find a will, and so somebody in the family says, well, what are we going to do? And the rest of the family goes, well, do we have any volunteers to take care of it? And hopefully someone in the family is going to go, okay, I'll do it. So that person is going to go to probate court, and they are going to say, what do I do? I have no will, but I'm willing to take this responsibility on myself. Okay, so what this person has said they will be is a dependent administrator. So the probate judge is going to look around and go, okay, so you would like to take this job. I don't know what questions they ask you, but they determine if you appear to be dependable. Okay. If no one in the family wants to do it, the court can assign someone, I guess, from a pool of people that they can use as administrators to do this, but they're going to get paid. So once again, here's the dollar signs starting to flash. So an independent administrator is one that has to have the court's permission to do all the various things that must be done. And that administrator has to go back multiple times to the court to get this permission. Can you imagine all the parking fees that's going to involve? I'm joking. Well, but all of the time it would take for that dependent administrator, who may be a relative, who knows, to keep going back to the court and say, okay, I did this, what do I do next? Okay. And I think that the court's going to say, well, first of all, you head to the nearest lawyer and you retain a lawyer. Okay, so it obviously is going to take a lot of time. It's going to take more money, which will deplete the resources of the estate eventually to be dispersed to the heirs. And if by chance there are minor children involved, the family may not be chosen because there are laws that specifically say who will be guardians. Yes, it's usually the closest members of the family. But if they are not found to be a good fit, the court can, it's within the judge's discretion of appointing those guardians. So if nothing else, hopefully you got that having no will is going to cause you to pay money and to involve more time and perhaps a lot of angst in the way that the laws say things will get distributed. It will not be up to Aunt June or Uncle Tommy how this gets handed out. They're very specific. They're called intestacy laws that will determine how things are distributed. Okay, so having no will is having a lot of problems. I will mention the trust. It's a possibility. The trust is a document, actually it's many little documents together that control how everything gets passed to your family or whomever you wish. The big asset or the big reason a lot of people like a trust is it's private, because I didn't mention it, but wills, everything about the will probate system is public. When you take your will, if you have it, you take it and you say, I'm going to wish to get on your docket for probate. They're going to publish that you have a will and that you have brought it to the probate court. In a trust, nobody goes to probate court. Nobody heads to downtown Fort Worth or wherever. It's all done by what they call a trustee. And you name that person. And you tell the trust lawyer exactly how you want things to go, and they write it up. And after waiting several weeks, they will provide you with this, actually a big binder of all the information that they have written, very legal. And you will just tell the trustee, here's your set of directions, and here's the number of the estate lawyer who will interpret it for you if you need it. Okay. It's in a trust, as long as you're living, you control it all, and you can change it all. It's called revocable. Once you die, it becomes irrevocable. It can't be changed. So, my husband and I had to go the trust way. And I'll tell you why. And I didn't realize why we would have needed to have it anyway if we had not known and done a will. It turns out in Texas, your executor needs to reside in Texas. However, if you're, and this is the situation with my children don't live in Texas. One of them doesn't even live in this country. And that's the one that needed to be the executor. Because she's our lawyer. All right. But if you name an executor who doesn't live in Texas, that executor has to get an agent to represent them. Because the law, I guess, really realizes if you live my other daughter lives in Florida, you cannot be hopping a plane every week or two to come back to the probate court if you needed it to do the next step. So there's the rule that you have to have an executor living in Texas, or they have to appoint an agent, which I'm sure requires a fee. So in my case, having gone through the trust way was the better option. Now, I will mention to you that a lot of people say, and they are correct in saying, that the trust can cost money, and significant money, a few $1,000s even. But I'm also here to tell you, so will probate. And when I didn't think about this, you have to, in my case, my children have to probate for me, the mom, and for the father when he passes. So they get to do it twice. They get to go through probate process twice, because if I have a will and my husband has a will, we've got two probate situations. Now, you may say, and you know, I've mentioned to you, I had a will 25, 30 years ago when my children were young. And my husband and I did have a joint will. Basically, to name the guardians for our kids is all we were really trying to do. Most lawyers will say, don't do a joint will, because once the first parent dies, the will cannot be changed. And it can't be, I have to do my own will anyway. So that was something I had no idea about, a joint will. Once the first parent or first spouse dies, that will's set, no changes, because that person who made the will with you can't give permission to change it. So that's why I'm saying mom has a will, dad has a will, and you want to go through the probate system, you will go through it twice. Now, when you start adding up all the fees that are required to do the probate process, it adds up quickly. So most probate bill, fees eventually add up to $2,500. And that's if there's no major issues with the family. If the family is very upset and starts to sue the estate because they didn't like that somebody did something like sell the property, if they want to sue the estate because they're unhappy, then your lawyer fees will probably balloon out of reason, and there will be no assets to hand over to anyone. And so once that was explained to me about doing two probates, I said, you have just paid for a trust that was done once and all. So for me, it was the right thing, but I'm not telling you that's what you need to do by any means. I'm just giving you options here. That's all I'm doing.
There's a caveat to the trust. You have to name your house, your car, everything under the trust. And that's a process nobody wants to do because it's.
Well, and I will just tell you that you're right. You have to name, you have to go back and title all of your property and your assets to the title of mine has a, my family's name living trust. I will tell you, it was not that hard for me. It was not. Our attorney took care of doing the house change for us. We paid him to do it, but that was taken care of. And all we had to do is go to the bank, and our financial man just helped us do all of that. For us, it was not hard, but I realized my situation might not be anybody else's. So I'm just going to say there are options. But the one option I would definitely say is don't go with the no will or anything situation, because the issues of running back and forth to the probate court to get the permission for every little thing you do is very frustrating and time consuming. Okay. And of course, I am not afraid to tell you that with any of these situations, you are better off with the advice of an attorney. I respect what they have to know, and you will benefit from it. I will briefly tell you what an executor has to do to probate your will, a will, briefly. So the executor hopefully was named in the will. That executor will head themselves down to the probate court. There's 2 of them in Fort Worth. Find a parking place and head on up to the department where you will file for the application to do the probate. So you come with your will. You say, I want to probate this. And they say, here's an application, which will cost money. Okay. In the county where the deceased lived. So I'm just making this. I realize not everybody is going to Tarrant County Courthouse. It's not going to be the right place for everybody. Okay, once you have applied for the administration, there's a posting, and it's a 2-week, usually around 2-week waiting period, where the clerk is going to post a notice that says you have applied to have this will probated. So does anyone want to contest this will? Okay. If no one, or does anyone want to contest the administrator, the executor? They feel like this is not a good person. So once again, here we start. Now, if no one contests anything, the court will open the administration. Number 3, after this waiting period, the judge has the time to look at your will and determine if it is a valid will. Now, I don't know exactly what the judge looks for, but I do know they're trying to ascertain, was the will coerced in any way? So if the person who made the will was not in full capacity of making that decision, it will not be a valid will. And the judge will appoint either, hopefully, an executor, or in that situation, if there's no executor, or the person said somebody about, my executor can be all my decedent, all my heirs, which is not a good way to write a will, but if the judge will make the final determination of who's the executor, or in the case of no will, an administrator. And by the way, just because you don't have a will doesn't mean you don't have to probate the estate. So if you don't have a will, you don't get home free. You still go through probate. You probate the estate, not the will. Now, so the executor is deemed worthy, and this executor is given, or the administrator, whichever, is given 90 days. Now get this, I'm a bit astounded at this. They prepare an inventory, appraisement, and a list of claims. Now, I don't know about your house, but I'm worried that my children could make an inventory and appraisement of all that's in my house in 90 days. It might take months. But anyway, the complete description of the assets with a reasonable, accurate valuation. I am not totally sure how that, how I can put a value on all the tchotchkes that are all over the place. But at any rate, and maybe they don't want that level of detail. But I don't think they can you cannot just say all the books, $200, all the furniture, $2,000. I don't know if it can be that broad or, I haven't seen the list. I haven't seen the inventory, so I'm not quite sure what that looks like. The beneficiaries, remember I said that the non-probate assets are the ones with the beneficiaries, your insurance, your 401, your 403, your IRA, your traditional, your Roth, all of those have beneficiaries, your banking account. The beneficiaries, as the executor who these beneficiaries are, hopefully. If there are no beneficiaries on some of these items, which I doubt that case would go past anyone who was helping you with it. But there is something called an affidavit of heirship. And that's a whole nother fee of when the court doesn't really know who the heirs are. And there's a process for finding all the possible heirs. Okay. The executor's got to notify all the creditors. Well, I find this interesting. It's according to what I've read, that obviously I told you that the state has to have some assets to pay all the debts with. And the creditors are supposed to be given notice. And it says you can do this by publishing it in the local newspaper. And I think about how many of us read our local newspaper anymore. So I am not really sure if this really flies anymore. Just say, oh yeah, I'll put it in the Star Telegram somewhere. But anyway, it does say that it can be accomplished by publishing it in the newspaper. So if all the creditors in the world possibly read the Fort Worth Star Telegram, maybe they'll recognize that someone has passed away that they, should be getting money from, and they will tell you. It would probably be in your best interest as the executor to notify the creditors that someone's passed away. It's kind of like, letting Social Security keep paying your Social Security check for months and months and months. I suspect creditors will figure out real soon if someone has left us without paying their debt. And number 7, of course, is resolving all the family disputes. And maybe your family is very cohesive and that's not a problem. But I realize that when it comes to money and inheriting sums of money or property, that family cohesiveness can disappear fast because we feel like we're entitled to something as much as my sibling or my cousin is entitled to it. So it can be challenging. The probate judge has 2 years to be able to hear all this. These are lawsuits usually, but without a doubt, they're going to recommend that you go to a mediator because that's going to be much quicker and probably less expensive than going through lawsuits. And finally, in number 8, after these debts are paid and disputes are resolved, the executor is going to disperse the assets that are left. And, people may be asking for it 2 weeks after the deceased is left. As the executor is saying, wait, this is a process that is, I take very seriously. It's a legal process. I need to follow the will, and I also need to follow the law. And I have a fiduciary responsibility to the family. So once you've said those words in a, good tone of voice, usually I think that would suffice, but I can't, I can't always do it. So the two other, well, there's a couple things. I've always heard powers of attorney. You need powers of attorney. And I thought, okay, well, let's, get us the power of attorney. Well, it turns out there are more than one kind of power of attorney here. And usually what people are talking about are just general powers of attorney. Well, look real carefully about what happens when you become incapacitated. And we know that happens. What happens to your power of attorney? When you become incapacitated, your powers of attorney general terminates. So it turns out, what's a better option? It is to have a medical power of attorney that will cover all of your health care issues and decisions when you become incapacitated. And folks, really, that's when we need it. It's not so much I need them while I'm functioning carefully, I'm thinking clear, and your durable power of attorney. And that person is for the financial part, your financial decisions, once you become incapacitated. Now, someone mentioned, well, could the general powers of attorney help my mother? I mean, she's not incapacitated, but, represent her because she's going to want to, I don't know, sell the house or something. And yeah, while your mother's still able to handle her business, she can have a general power of attorney represent her and help her make decisions. But once she's incapacitated, the general power cannot. You would need medical and or both durable. And what is incapacitation in Texas? Well, it's not just an adult, it's a minor, someone under the age of 18. And it's an adult who cannot provide their own food, clothing, physical health, financial affairs, or sheltering because of any physical or mental condition. So that's what we're looking at. So everything I read says, while you are able, get yourself some documents and name your medical and your durable powers of attorney and let somebody know where those are. It very might be needed once you get, some significant age. So the last thing is just how do we make our handling our state easier on our loved ones? And this is kind of like a recap of, I told you I had some goals. Did I address them? So the first one is, I would just put the big star on this one. Have the conversations prior to incapacitation with your loved ones. Get that medical and that durable powers of attorney. Know if they have a will or a trust, or if they don't, help them make a decision that might be better to go ahead and do a will. Ask them, do they have a preference about what's done with the body after death? And do they want a service? Do they want a full-blown funeral? Do they just want a cremation? And disperse the ashes? Do they want to will their body? Have that conversation. Yeah, it's kind of uncomfortable. And I would say if getting that started, you might try an indirect approach. If you go to your parents and you say, you know, I was reading, or I have a friend who's going through this situation with their loved ones, and they've run into some problems that I would like to share with you so that maybe we could make this easier for us and much more economical for us. That way it's not, well, I know you're going to die soon, so what do you want to do with your body? I mean, that's pretty abrupt. So making it less, I know it's going to happen, and it's, I mean, you know, we know it's going to happen. We just don't know when. Number 3 is get that will, get that trust, and get the legal counsel to make sure you are doing it correctly. I will say, from what I've read, that most probate courts require you to have an attorney. And I will say this is why. In your glossary, there is a definition. It's called P-R-O, se, S-E, per se. And when you are wanting to use per se, you are an individual who is wanting to go to the court. You are representing yourself, and you may also think you're going to represent your family members. And you think, okay, I'm not going to get an attorney. I'm going to represent us in this probate process. The court may say, oh, we have a law. And that law says if you are representing anyone besides yourself, you are now representing them as a lawyer. If you are not a lawyer, you are violating the law. So you are required to have an attorney because as the executor, you're a fiduciary, you're supposed to be impartial. And if you are representing them and yourself, can you be impartial? We'd like to think we could, but inherently, probably we are looking out for ourselves as well. So that is the pro se issue, that the probate court may say, I'm sorry, get your lawyer. So, and I think about the court clerks. Can you imagine day after day after day, if they didn't have any kind of requirement to get a lawyer, you have people coming up there who have no real idea of what they're doing with their will and saying, here's my will, what do I do next? I think about all the issues that can arise with a bunch of people who have really no concept of what this involves. And not that they are wishing to be uneducated, they just don't know what they don't know. So anyway, I can see the reasoning behind you need your legal counsel so that you are doing it correctly. You hope that your will says that you can be the independent administrator. Oh, did this save time and money? Yes. With a trust, you've identified your trustee or trustees. You have followed the advice of the estate attorney. And number 7, be respectful of the family. Be sure we know where your documents are kept. That ideally, this is the person that's going to be the executor knows where everything is kept. And number 8, be willing to spend some money to ask the attorney to lead you through this very complex legal issue that can be a problem for families for years. And the more complicated your financial situation, the more money that it involves, the more time it will take. I will say that I read in many situations, if you have millions of dollars, it's going to take you 5 years to get all that sorted. If you do have a very small estate, it may not take that long. If your estate is $75,000 or less, minus your exempt property, which I didn't even go in there, it may be a matter of months. But the attorney is going to give you the advice you need, and in the long run, it will be what you will be glad you did. So my question to myself was, do I need an attorney? And most likely, yes. Yes. And I wrote this: we cannot anticipate all the situations that may affect our estate. We will spend more time, more effort, and more money correcting our mistakes. Maybe we didn't realize what the law allows, or it may require. And that Patrece thing is an example. So what I have hoped I've hammered is that have a conversation with your family. Know where the documents are. Hopefully know who the executor will be. That they have a will. That they tell you what they want. That you know the process. We can look back on this and see it. That you will get an attorney that will help you with all the nuances of your situation. And that your family is on board with it. So there's no contest in a situation like that. I really hope that this has been helpful to you, and that you don't go out of here going, like I do with most of these. I come from state dinner. I don't do them, but if people do that, I would be going out going, I don't really know what was said, because I enjoyed the state dinner more than the presentation, but there was no state dinner involved here. So anyway, I wish you the best, and share it with your friends and family. And if you have specific questions, I'll do what I can, but I may not be the person who really need to ask. Thank you very much.